that bastard? Butterflies danced in India's belly as she squinted to see down the road, as far into the darkness as she could. Where is this person? Back that way. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. The other guy hadn't driven off? Why? Is he seriously injured? Rod stretched his fingers as if his hand hurt. Probably not seriously, but he's out cold. She still wasn't clear on why he'd been walking in the road. This remote location wasn't one you'd arrive at on foot. So, why are you without transportation? Were you traveling together? No. He wrecked my motorcycle when he came up from behind and ran me off the road. Now it's undrivable. And somehow in the scuffle I lost my phone. I looked for his, but he doesn't seem to have one on him. It's a miracle you're alive, she said, as she reached for her cell. What would make someone do what he did? Obviously irritated, Rod gestured as if too much had happened to explain. It started before, at the bar. I should have kicked his ass then. Oh, God. Her hand shook as she dialed 911. She didn't do well with violence. She'd seen too much of it. That was part of the reason she'd come to Whiskey Creek, to start over in a place that still felt innocent. Her past was littered with dangerous yet attractive rebels, men a lot like this neighbor of hers. The rough outlaw type used to fill her with excitement, with desire. They made her feel alive. She'd learned a few lessons since then about what really mattered. It wasn't a reckless disregard for the rules, or a handsome face and rock-hard abs. These days, she understood that in more than a cognitive sense. It had sunk deep into her emotional memory. But whether she'd learned her lesson or not, she was still paying a terrible price for having associated with the wrong people. As she waited for the dispatcher to pick up, she eyed the tattoo, a snake slithering up a tree that covered the sinewy contours of Rod's right arm until it disappeared into the sleeve of his white t-shirt. Yep, this was exactly the kind of guy she would have liked once upon a time. She wouldn't have cared that he could be volatile. She wouldn't have cared that he probably didn't have a college education or even a decent job. Physically, he was everything a woman dreamed about. And he'd probably be good in bed, although she had no idea where that thought came from, just the casual way he held himself, his lack of self-consciousness and natural confidence, she supposed. He stood out from other men, but the intimacy she'd shared with Charlie, who was nothing like this guy, had been sweet and fulfilling. What Charlie had brought to the rest of her life was even better. She needed to find another man like him when she was ready. 911, what is your emergency? At the sound of the operator's voice, she snapped to attention. Hello, I'm out on... She looked up at Rod for help. She'd forgotten the name of the street. She wasn't familiar with anything other than the few blocks that constituted the center of town and Gulliver Lane, which led from town to her place. Old Church Road, he said. She'd begun to repeat that when he took her phone and spoke into it himself. There's been an incident about a mile before you get to Sexy Sadie's, outside Whiskey Creek. A man's down, so send an ambulance. The operator must have asked for more details because he said, I'm not a doctor. All I can tell you is that he's not moving. Sir, what caused his injuries? Are you still there? Can I get your name? India could hear those questions, since Rod was handing her the cell. Just get someone here quick, she told the dispatcher and disconnected. Would you mind giving me a ride back to my bike? He asked. India wasn't sure she wanted him in her car, but he had to know she was going in that direction. They lived next door to each other. Okay, she said, because she didn't see how she could refuse. When he walked around the front of her car, she noticed that he favored his left leg and figured he had a few injuries of his own, in addition to the scraped knuckles and busted lip. You could use some medical attention yourself, she said when he opened the passenger door. I'm all right, he responded as he climbed in.